I hereby call the Finance Committee meeting to order. It's Monday, October 17th, 2022. It is 6:01 p.m. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Francis Pollard, Michael Landry, Marcus Broussard, Lloyd Brown, Warren Gotchison, Natalie Broussard, Paul Landry, James Traham, Scott Ronsonet,
Here.
Eugene Olivier, Brian Napier, Lady Fontenette Brown, Scott Saunier, and Chad Monterin.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll use the same format as we did last week. We'll just go fun through fun. Mr. Gurr will lead off, and then the director or whoever. If you don't mind, if you come to the podium, name and title is all we ask. That way the public knows who's speaking. All
So
right.
the sewage district fund, the main revenue stream is the sewer user fees. Those are actually charged to the customers based on water consumption. Those fees are actually charged and collected through various water systems, LUCO, by UTESH, and Water District 3. So it'll be the same thing for the regular fund and the Port of Iberia fund for those revenues. But obviously Port of Iberia in that much smaller area, just the port. You want to go through the expenses?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Brad Crater, Sewer District. Okay, so I feel like the easiest way to do this is for me to go and look at anything that might be a little bit more of a spike or downplay in our overall budget from this year to next year. And by and large, there's not a whole lot of change in the department from 2022 going into 2023. Just to kind of give you a little idea of what my overall game plan when I'm dealing with the budget, right? So from 2018 through 2021, our operating expenses were anywhere between 2.45 to 2.6 million worth of operating expenses. So while factoring that in, we budget a little higher than that. I like to see in our operating account anywhere between, at a bare minimum, 6 months of operating expenses in there. Right now, we're at about 9 or 10. So we're in a pretty healthy situation as far as where we are on our balance sheet in comparison to what the budget looks like. I mentioned last year that we're pushing a little bit harder on improvements around the area since I've taken over as director. Looking at new equipment, we're allocating a lot more money to pumps. That's the heartbeat of our system. Looking at upgrades at Plant 3, Teat Bayou Plant, which we share half with the city of New Iberia, joint ownership, and really investing back into our infrastructure. So my game plan as we go along is that I keep a close eye on what the operating account is, the actual checking operating account, what we have cash on hand. And I use my budget as an overall game plan. The way I like to equate it is that in sports, you have a playbook. It doesn't mean you're going to use every single play, right? So if I had an ideal world, this is what would happen. Obviously, it doesn't always go that way. You have curveballs through the year and things of that nature. So that being said, a few little things that we are highlighting here that are a little bit higher than normal. Professional services is a little higher. What I'm doing on this is that I'm trying to make sure I have enough money allocated for engineering services for next year in case we run into any problems with the water sector grant, right? Everybody aware that we have a lot of funding coming in from the water sector grant. I just want to be careful that if I have to scramble for engineering services for a sub-project, I have that money available. Repair and maintenance of vehicles, that's going to go up a little bit. Keep in mind fuel prices. That's one thing that we've budgeted a little bit more for this year. Looking at field improvements, I call that field improvements. That's going to be improvement other buildings. On this one, our main project next year is Michelle Lane. What I want to do in that area is a complete overhaul of the wet well system, the pumps, electrical, even running a new force main down Michelle Lane. That is one of our bigger connecting pieces for our department as far as from Oak Hill down to Highway 344 and 677. It kind of ties a lot of stuff in. It's in a very precarious situation, and it's been needing some attention for a little while. That's going to be our big project. The $170,000 I have in new equipment. We're looking at about $120,000, I believe, in pumps. I budget that all year, every year. That's just a necessary evil of our business. And then the next capital improvement line item, which I call our Plant 3 repairs, is contract payments, $575,000. Basically, a new dump truck at our Teat Bayou facility for land application to haul all of the, at that time, fertilizer to the fields to dispose of it. And then just some ancillary, secondary line items as far as small repairs that might come up. Keep in mind, excuse me, I really try to use these three line items as a little bit of a buffer in case we have emergencies. This year, the sewer department's really worked very hard trying to finalize a lot of projects that have been hanging in the balance. Lewis Street lift station relocation, electrical upgrade, Paul Segura Parkway. We have, for 2023 coming up, we have a UL lift station relocation. We were awarded the water sector grant. So overall, I'm a little more comfortable going into next year that we have a little bit more of what I consider financial buffer in case we incur increased costs, which we've seen over the last 2 years. Other than that, I want to open up for questions unless Ms. Segura, if there's something I missed that's pertinent, but I'll entertain any questions of any nature.
Madam Clerk, let the record reflect that Lady Brown is in attendance. Warren, I saw you go up first.
Thank you, Brad. I do have some questions when we go to the DEQ loans.
Sure.
What's the parameters for us to go out and secure that low-interest money? Because obviously, the pump truck, the crane truck, a lot of those are being purchased with that money.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we limited to as far as utilizing or using the benefits of that low-interest loan?
So as far as, if you're asking, like, how do we procure the equipment through that?
No, I'm asking, what else can we use it for? Because
Oh,
at times, I think Cotton Street, we did some, I think that DEQ loan was part of the Cotton Street with the levee system, correct?
correct. That is correct, yes.
So we can actually go out and purchase equipment?
You have to send everything in for them for approval. But in the initial loan, and you might need to help me with this, the initial loan, from what I remember, it was about 2.4 to 2.5 million that was allocated purely for construction. And there was another $500,000
Yeah,
that was
so
set
$3
aside for
million,
equipment.
right.
But that was done at the onset of applying for the loan. So it listed what you were going to use the loan for, what the need was for those construction and the items. And you do have a little bit of flexibility that as long as you show need and procure things for equipment by the proper process, you can kind of utilize the funds as you see fit if you show need and document properly.
Got you. And if you could put a percentage on the completion of the Estes project of that 15,000, obviously you're anticipating the completion of the project in 22. About what percentage are you finished with that project?
85%. We have just a few minor things to get done.
And no reason why you shouldn't have a carryover in 23?
There will be no carryover.
Going to rental equipment on page 3. Obviously, again, and the reason why I asked about that DEQ loan, what are we renting exactly for 95,000 anticipated?
We do have some rental bypass pumps right now, which we are looking to rectify very shortly. But also, I do keep a buffer in there in case we have to maybe rent an extra wash wagon or what we call a vacuum truck, right? But also, come hurricane season, the rental of other generators, which hopefully that'll be rectified a little bit better for us because of the water sector grant. We have 16 coming. But I want to have more than needed.
As far as the UL lift station, when do you think, I mean, obviously you're going out to bid for that lift station repairs or replacement or moving. When do you think that's going to be up and running? Because I know that the administration is working very diligently to get that project going, or in the phase of getting it going. How long will it take you between the inception of getting the bid awarded to the completion?
I would hope no more than 90 to 120 days. I would hope for construction.
Now, listen, your chairman wanted me to grill you a little more than this, but I'm going to stop here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Good
taking
job,
it easy
Brad.
on it.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Mr. Saunier?
I just want to know if, I'm a little concerned about the fund balance. We're about, at the end of 2023, if I'm looking at this right, we're about a little over 1.1 million less than you started with in 2022.
Correct.
Is that concerning?
Well, you have a lot of capital outlay improvements,
No, I
one-time monies in that budget.
I understand that.
That won't be carryovers.
I
So
want to know if you're comfortable with that.
I am. I do keep track of that. I'm pulling that up real quick. If you have 1 second, please. So I've kept track of the fund balances for the entire time I've been here, even before I was a director. And just a little historical data. Back in 2017, the fund balance was starting at 1.21 million. That went up to 1.4 in 2018, stayed around 1.4, 2019, 2020 is 1.5, and then about 1.8 in 2021, and we started, let's see. I think we did start this year at about 2.2. Correct, Kimberly? Yeah, about 2.2. So our fund balance has actually increased over the last 6 years.
Okay.
And I do keep a track of where we're going to be with those capital improvements. I did say last year, and I want to reiterate that I know that I'm pushing hard in the budget, but I think they're necessary pushes to utilize the money we get from our constituents the right way. Invest back into the infrastructure for a lot of different things that frankly should have been done prior. And I'm not just going to sit there and let the money not work for us. So I keep a good eye on all three.
That's the best answer I've heard in this room yet.
I like that.
Yeah, Mr. Saunier.
Well studied. Hey, good job, man. I'm telling you. I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Broussard?
Yeah, Brad, I wanted to say that same thing because I was looking at the fund balance just like Scott was, and I was getting concerned going that low. And so I appreciate you pointing that out and showing us how that fund balance has grown. And that was the whole point of Mr. Landry's hard work on trying to get that flow rate changed so that we can do these capital improvements. So, you know, I think it's a great point that the people can see that you are using their money to do what we said we were going to do and do the capital improvements. And it's great to point it out and for us to actually see it happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gustafson?
Yeah, and also this budget's not actually reflecting some future projects that will come down the road that will bring up your user fees from this 2.8 million, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
So that, again, most of your all of your capital outlay improvements are enhancements or improvements, not expansions, correct?
Yeah, these are improvements. That is correct. And just if anybody would ever like to talk to, I do have roughly 3 to 5 year plan on properly increasing revenue without raising rates. There's a lot of things that we need to do on our end to become better. So I won't go through all that right now. If you'd like to sit down.
Well, Brad, as a taxpayer, I can't thank you enough for the job
Yeah.
that you're doing.
But you can point out exactly one big item is water and sewer working together more than we've ever done before, which
think
will
so.
be a benefit not just to the taxpayers, but to the users of those utilities.
I think so as well. I really do. I'm very excited about that.
I'm good.
Anyone else? Mr. Gurr, you want to finalize, or you can do it?
Y'all wanna let Brian talk about?
Oh, yeah, we can go to the port. It's tied
Yeah.
together somewhat. Yeah.
Okay. So Port of Iberia Fund. I guess on the port, I was thinking about what I wanted to say as far as the budget over here. There's not a whole lot of change from year to year with the port. Last year, after many days of headache trying to figure out what the proper budget should be of the Port of Iberia, we were able to really revamp the overall budget structure, put the costs where they should have been. Again, the port went through a lot of downturn, and we were still incurring a lot of costs for operating expense at the port that wasn't necessarily reflective of what was going on. So the only minor changes I have is a little fluctuation in laboratory testing and chemicals. The port is now responsible for the majority of laboratory testing. I left a little money in there in case I want to do some testing on my own if I'm concerned. The chemical line item, chlorine's getting very expensive. So I wanted to adjust that up as well. So I wanted to bring this note. When I took over as interim director of the port, we had two separate accounts, cash accounts with about $112,000 in them combined. And at that time, we were losing anywhere between $5,000 to $6,000 a month in cash. And we were in dire straits as to being able to even do the job that we're really good at, running sewer lift stations and maintaining those operations. In February of last year, we started looking that the operating account was almost drained. We combined the investment account to the operating account. Countless meetings with Mr. Romero at the port, his board. We were able to come to an agreement on the budget. And I'm happy to report that in February of this year, we had $34,000 in the operating account. And as of 2 weeks ago, we had $42,000. So we were able to right the ship, give the services that we provide without sacrificing anything. More importantly, we didn't have to raise rates, which I did not want to do at all, because I know the port is in need of more business and they don't need any more stress. So I think we have it going in the right direction now.
Any
And
questions?
I'll take any questions as well.
I don't think we're gonna have any on this one. All right, you wanna finalize, Mr. Gurr?
So just a couple of comments about the regular sewer district fund. You'll also notice, as Brad was going through, recently y'all approved a budget adjustment that appropriated funding for a variety of projects, and you don't see that in here. So we start our budget process in July. When we capture all of those accounts, they pull from our regular general ledger module into the budget module. So it pulls those existing accounts that are there at that particular time. In order to get the rest of them in there, like later, we have to have budget adjustments and posted. So by the time y'all adopt the resolutions and they come back into finance, it might take probably, at least, well, it's probably about a month after they're adopted to get those balances all into Munis by the time we get the resolutions to post everything over in there. So before we do our final adoption, I'm gonna pull the rest of that information so that going forward, we'll have good starting balances and we won't have to come back and do a big carry forward adjustment because I mean, that was probably what, like 9 or 10 different little projects.
Yes,
So that'll be a bigger adjustment, but we'll take care of that when we do the administrative adjustment. One other thing, relative to the DEQ loan, the DEQ loan has a covenant. In that covenant, the DEQ requires a calculation to be made each year. It's got to be supplied to their office with the audit report. We have to compare operating income, net of depreciation expense, to the debt service payments that are actually paid. And that number has got to be more than 1.25. 1.25 more than what the debt service paid was. So when you go through those calculations, we have to make sure that we have operating income, sufficient to meet that covenant. Otherwise, we'll have a finding, the auditors will report it in our report as well. But DEQ is gonna force some adjustments as well. They'll force you to go up on your rates to make sure that you meet that covenant. So when you're looking at the numbers and the deficit that's reported, and we have a bunch of capital things, what we don't budget for is the depreciation. But we make entries at the end of the year to take those capital purchases, anything that needs to be capitalized. So that comes off the income statement and goes on your balance sheet. But what you do have that hits your income statement is the depreciation expense. But that depreciation expense is spread over the useful life of that asset. So it's kind of, I mean, if you look at the depreciation expense in the sewage district's fund last year, it was about 800,000.
Yes.
And then the capital, they probably have more than 800,000, accounted for in capital.
1.8 million, huh?
In,
That's one point.
in 23's budget.
1.8 million.
So fund balance wise, I know y'all have already, touched on it, 2.2 million at the beginning of 22. We are looking at a reported a projected deficit of about 375,000 for fiscal 22. So that'll bring that fund balance down to $1.8 million, and then an $800,000 deficit for fiscal 23. And then that fund balance would be down to a little bit less than 1.1. So last week I kind of did it backwards. I guess I kind of got lost track. So the 4% salary adjustment calculation will result in an additional $4,000 to a reported expenditures in the budget, and then a 5% adjustment would be approximately $7,000. Any questions on that? So on the port fund balance, 51,000 at the beginning of 22, a small surplus of $877 for fiscal 22, bringing that fund balance up to 52,000, and then we have it budgeted even for fiscal 23, so that fund balance would remain at 52,000 at the end of fiscal 23.
Any questions?
I do. On the 1.25 for the DEQ loan, so do you plan for that? I mean, you try to make sure.
Oh, yeah.
And if we do fall short and they find it, if you have to raise rates, they accept it the following, because it takes a while for that to hit.
Yeah, so
They don't make you back pay or fine you or anything, do they? There's no
We-
penalties?
I'm not aware of a penalty.
And I'm
Okay.
not either. I don't think that there is, Mr. Sonic. I'm not 100% certain. But, no, we do take that into account, and actually, Mr. Gear does a great job in helping. We talk about that every year.
Okay.
You know where we're gonna be, and she keeps me in line as well.
Yeah, I know how
And
that
lots
is.
of times lots of times it's moving, and it's hard, but, I mean, one way to overcome it would be to cut expenses, the raising of the revenue is not always the easier, but like in our situation, we've seen positive results on the, on our interest. So whereas we may have thought that number was a little bit higher, so maybe it would just be, that change there, that would be enough to kind of overcome it as well,
Okay.
so.
Anybody else? That's it. Thank you. Waterworks. Waterworks District 3.
So the Waterworks District Number 3 fund is supported by a water user fee that is charged to their customers is based on the consumption. That's billed out every month and then collected.
Name and title, please.
Good evening. My name is Jody Swear. I'm president of the board, Iberia Parish Waterworks District Number 3.
Thank you.
So what we've projected for 2023 in user fees is a little more than $1,025,000 be exact. A couple of our big ticket increases that we see coming up next year, primarily in Medicare, workers' comp, and then some indirect costs related to, I guess what you're going to say, what the benefits that we give our employees. The things that the board can control, one of the items is, just as Brad mentioned, chemicals, chlorine, so forth. We're looking at about a 5 to 6% increase. Again, it's a coin toss because we don't know how the water's going to turn out month to month, but we've seen an increase, so we bumped it up 5%. We also increased our utility projection, again, based on what we've seen in the market. And then we've got a truck that we're going to be getting rid of one and then purchasing another next year. Other than that, we had a little bit of a windfall this past year. Through the years, the board unknowingly kept putting money in the same type of covenant fund for the USDA loan that we had from '07. Didn't realize that once we met the threshold for the 3 accounts that we were supposed to be providing, that we could stop funding those accounts. And Mr. Garrett promptly let us know. So we shut down those accounts. Was it beginning of this year that we paid it off? Or? It might have been the end of the year. End of 21 or beginning of 22. We had enough money in reserve and fund balance that we paid off the loan that we had ahead of time, and it saved us maybe $30,000 or $40,000 in interest. But the money that we put into those accounts totaled a couple $100,000. So that helped our fund balance this year, and it should help us moving forward. A couple of projects we've got in play right now is the turnabout at Highway 88. We run those lines. That should be complete. And now the contractors have moved over to the 88 straightening on the backside of the school and the church over there. And then we're constantly making sure that the contractors for that beautiful fiber is fixing all the lines that they bust when they run and bore the lines.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Garcia.
Okay, Mr. Swear.
Yes.
So when I go back to these, I guess, engineers and architects, you got 30,000 under non-division, which I know has got to be more because I think when y'all just went out for the second round of water sector grants, that's not in here to pay for him to file the report. Wasn't in that line item, right? You took it from another line item, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, we did a budget. We did a line item adjustment. Yes.
Okay.
So our last meeting.
Do you? I don't recall. I mean, I remember y'all doing. What line item did you take that from? Do you remember? Off top.
573.
573. From improvements other.
Yeah.
So-
that would make sense.
So the 116,000, that was part of the water system improvements.
No. The 116 is what we're projecting. The 100,000 that the 54 off of the 140.
That's what
oh no,
you
we
spent
did
so
revise
far
it.
this
I'm
year.
sorry, we
Right.
did revise it. It was originally 140. We revised it to 116 at some point. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you carry over into 23 to be 116 again, right?
Correct.
And there was another thing I wanted to ask you. So, separate from the new building construction of 300,000, you're going to go out for the water sector money. That's going to be for a
Correct.
new well, correct?
It's going to be for a new well, a new holding tank, a new filter, all the electrical and instrumentation required to run the plant inside. We'll upgrade everything inside of there, and then upgrades to water lines if there's anything left over.
Did y'all hear anything back yet? Have we?
No, from what I understand, they're not even gonna meet until November to start
Okay.
deciding how they're gonna do the process. We expect to hear something back in December, maybe early January.
Okay, I have one more question as far as the operation. So when we go and determine each month our water usage, do we actually go to the Badgers and collect that data, or do we take an average of consumption in the house over a 12-month period? How do we determine that?
How do we determine what?
How do we
Say that again?
determine each water usage in each household? How do we determine that?
We pay a contractor, they go around and they read the meters.
And he reads each of the meters every month and comes back to, okay, so it's not
Now-
on an average.
No, there are some that are done on an average if they
Okay.
can't get inside the property to read the meter. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The only thing is, and I think you and I had this conversation, and we having it all over, not just in water districts, so not to point anybody out particularly, but architecture and engineering is costing the parish heavily. I mean, I know we talked a lot, I mean, and again, of
Yeah.
course, you have particularly, Mr. Dubrock or Mr. Dale, he's professional when it comes to water, so everybody has this little nit on what they do,
Right.
but at some point, I mean, me and Mr. Landry and several others have talked about hiring our in-house engineer to save us some money. I mean, we'll have to pay, but I think in the long run, even in the one fiscal year, we can pay that plus put money in the bank. So we've got to start looking at some kind of alternative because it's eating our lunch. I mean, I think if I seen correctly, just if y'all got the water sector grant, engineering was almost $1 million.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but understand this too, and we're probably getting off topic a little bit. You can hire an engineer. You get a project like this, he's gonna sub it out.
You're still gonna have to sub it, yeah,
Oh,
I agree.
yeah. He's not gonna have the resources and the time to manage a project like that. You're gonna hire somebody who's gonna do your day-to-day
Right.
stuff.
Which, some of this we can do in-house.
That's
That
correct.
could save us money in the long
That's
run, and I
correct.
agree.
Yeah.
There's gonna be some of those specialty items where you would need a Dubrox or
Right.
several people like that.
Yeah.
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Jody.
Oh, anytime.
Mr. Sonia?
Repair and maintenance of equipment. I notice y'all budget 60,000 every year.
Yes.
Looks like you go over that a smidgen sometimes.
It
Should you
it-
increase that or?
Well, if you go back a couple years before that, it was more. And then we had a couple years where we didn't have any major repairs. So we adjusted and went down. And then here recently, we redid the manifold between pumps so that we can isolate each pump. Now, if one pump goes down, the whole system doesn't go down. And there's a couple other things that we're doing in the filters, and they're all hitting at the same time here in these last couple of years. Next year, we'll probably revisit it and bump it up another 15 and pull from something else. Just so the board, for those that maybe don't know, the 300,000 for buildings is strictly for a new building and can't be touched for anything else. That's why it sits there and it keeps rolling over. Because the 300,000 is carried over from when it was the co-op, correct. They had it in CDs dedicated to doing a new office, and that's part of our plan, right? Our long-term goal is to move the office across the street so that the customers have a safe way to get in and out and take care of their business and won't have to be sitting right there on the corner of Melanson trying to get in and out. But that 300,000, when we took over, wasn't enough to put a building up.
I was about to say, you better hurry up and build it. Or you
Oh,
end
no,
up
no,
with a
no,
portalet.
no, 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 they did, right before I came on, they had, there's plans drawn up, and at that time, I think it was 5.25. So now it's probably closer to 750.
Mr. Matre?
Jody, you mentioned about breaking the lines with the board, and are
Yes.
we recouping expenses on that?
Yes, yes.
Because we've had
Every
6,
time
7,
every
8
time
in
it
the
breaks,
last
we
3
go
months?
out and we document it. Our guys make sure that they fix it properly. If in the case, last Thursday, the lines go low enough on the water pressure, we put out the ball water
Right.
advisory. Please let your constituents know. Iberia pins, www. And if the water pressure stayed, sometimes the water pressure's fine, the leak isn't that bad, they can isolate, fix it, and put it back on, and they're good. Then we just keep rocking and rolling.
But when there's an incident like that, it's y'all contractors or whoever, y'all approve this repairing it?
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
doing the
So
repair.
sometimes the contractors who broke it are repairing it, but they're repairing it under the guidance of our guys.
Okay.
So we don't let them bury it and put it back into service without us
Okay.
making sure that it was correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I was getting at, because,
Yes.
I mean, you get to a point where you keep
Yes.
patching up all these lines,
Yes.
what's gonna happen down the road? If it's
Well,
not done right?
The lines are, that PTFE and they're glued anyway, so, I mean, you don't want that many lines, that many connections, but there's not a whole lot you can do,
Right.
The only other thing you could do is figure out where the two seams are and then
Yeah.
backtrack to it, and they come in 20-foot joints. Once you cut that joint out, now you're 21 feet 6 inches. Well, how do you're gonna create a new joint
Right.
regardless.
I just wanna make sure it was,
Yeah.
that y'all guys gonna keep
Yeah,
up with it.
we figure out who did it. Miss Brenda takes down the information, they get sent a bill, and then we take care of it.
All right, Mr. Gustafson?
Yeah, just, I want to go back to personnel services. I understand that we're still looking for the executive water director, which is the 58,000, but that's hypothetical. You tried to do that last year, that was in the budget, right? And we still hadn't found a body. We're just carrying that position over to, in
Yes.
23, and then the laborer, that's just
No,
somebody to
labor,
come in and,
it's just what it sounds like, it's a laborer to come in and do some menial tasks that is robbing man hours and resources from our operator.
and that personnel services can be even lower because you're going to lose a plant operator pretty shortly soon, right?
Yes,
So,
but
again,
we need that individual.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't want to take it out of the line because we've already started the
No.
process to replace him.
And the reason I'm getting at is Ms. Kim's gonna come up shortly and she's gonna give us the 4 and 5%. And that figure is gonna be much lower come next year. Because, keep in mind that Brad's there as a director, that isn't costing an additional dollar, which saves the district in the long run, but also helps us to have those two departments working together. So, I mean, I just wanted to point that out. I mean, he's got a $58,000 line item and then a new laborer and 27,000. So that increase is gonna be, it's gonna be much less than anticipated. I'm
Yeah.
good though. Just
Are
to
y'all
point that
having
out.
trouble hiring the labor position?
For $13 an hour, let's say, yeah.
I interviewed one. So I will tell you this, and I still have some research to do, because I'm not sure yet if my board is obligated to follow the parish's Archer study and pay scale. If we are, the answer is yes. We can't hire them, because we can't pay them what the market pays for that individual.
But a laborer, you've heard, like I saw Philip was cutting grass today, somebody cut grass, paint hydrants,
Paint
do stuff like
hydrant,
that.
whatever,
Wash
push
the
a
tanks, do
broom,
things
that's
like
right,
that.
that's exactly right. That's what we're trying to find. And if I could find two, I would. Because I think we've got enough work to do to keep two of them busy and let the operators operate.
Yeah, no,
You know?
I no doubt I
Yeah.
do that. Okay.
Anyone else? That's it, thank you.
No, thank you.
Mr. Gurr, you wanna finalize?
So the 4% calculation is 4,200, and the 5% calculation is 7,000. So just to kind of touch on the water sewer combination, at some point, we're probably gonna have to look at the director's salary and cost share that in some fashion, just to make sure that we accounting for things properly. I mean, he is providing that service. I understood that, through the end of this year for sure that, it's more just a kind of look and see, observe, kind of thing. But like into next year, we'll have to address that in some fashion.
Well, let me ask you, while you're up there, that new 2023 position, Executive Director Water District, is that the title that you had before that? Because I think you were looking for a director and a plant manager in one, correct?
No, I'm pretty sure that that's how it was labeled and has been labeled the last couple of years.
That's how it's titled.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah.
he would do that, or that person would do both the plant, he'll be the plant manager and the office manager. I mean,
Or-
I look at it as two different functions of that office.
They are two different functions.
Okay.
The way this
One
was
person.
done prior to me coming on, when they created the position.
The manager?
summary, thank you. They created one that would do both, basically.
Yeah, I mean, they have an office manager on,
Ms.
you know,
Brenda, right.
yeah, Ms. Brenda is considered the office manager. So the executive director would be the overseer of all the operations, you know, out there. And so the way, you know, I mean, assuming that that position, you know, would not be filled, you know, a portion of that salary, you know, would be used to pay the combined director, if that's how that, you know, proceeds forward. So fund balance wise, fiscal '22 at the beginning, 1.1 million in fund balance, a projected surplus of 281,000 for fiscal '22. So that brings the fund balance up to 1.4 million. And then rolling into '23, there is a budgeted deficit of right at 200,000. So that would bring the fund balance down to 1.2 million.
Airport Authority Fund?
4%, 5%.
She did it.
She did it.
It's 4,000 and 7,000.
Yeah.
4,200 and 7,000, yeah.
I'm gonna prepare a you know, a tabular, for all funds for next week. So that way, yeah, so that way y'all gonna have it, you know, just a little snapshot on one page. So the Airport Authority Fund is supported with rentals. Those rentals are charged to the tenants of both ARA and the Lemaire Airport in General. Also a major contributor is flowage fees and then the crop income. The rentals do account for about approximately 83% of their total revenues. And keep in mind, you know, the business concentration, you do have one customer that contributes 70% of those rentals.
You just cost it back.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mo Sanji, Airport Director, Iberia Parish Airport Authority. Just to go over the revenue first, it's pretty straightforward. As Kim mentioned, most of our revenue is from leases. It's pretty consistent because our hangars are full. So we pretty much know what we're going to have from year to year. It does go up. We do have escalation clauses in our leases, and this year was pretty good because most of them are done with the CPI. You know, that was pretty good. Another thing she mentioned is fuel flowage. We kind of our fuel flowage. We kind of very conservative with our fuel flowage, and the reason being, it kind of goes off the price of the price of the fuel, but also the higher the fewer people fly. We were very conservative with that. We had 55,000 for last year, and we kind of cut it down to 45,000. Also, the crop income, we've kept it the same thing over the past several years, and it you can look back. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. It just depends on the. We have a formula with the acreage and the yield. You know, that's pretty much all our revenue at Lemaire and Acadiana Regional. The expenses, everything's pretty much. We were pretty conservative this year. If anything to do with utilities, just because you know, of course, utilities have gone sky high, and so we wanted to be kind of put some padding in there, just to be careful. Nothing really jumps out. If anything jumps out at y'all, just kind of let me know. A lot of stuff we kind of trimmed the fat on a lot of things. We had some things that were kind of high the past few years. We weren't using, so we kind of trimmed that down. You'll see for maintenance, some of the expenses for maintenance, we kind of bumped up the equipment maintenance fund a little bit, and main reason is you know, of course, y'all that have tractors know that these things break and they're not cheap when they break. So we kind of pushed close to the projected budget for 2022. So I wanted to pad it a little bit for 2023 because our tractors are getting kind of old. You see also equipment furniture for the maintenance. You see $170,000. That's to replace a tractor, a bush hog, and a truck. They're both aging, and we're starting to have trouble. And one thing I don't like to do is start putting money into tractors and stuff like that. When you put money in to keep them going, and it's so we especially the truck. The truck's aging, and the heater doesn't work in and the seat's broken, and I don't want to put a lot of money into something when we can just go ahead and replace it. It's like, it's over 10 years old.
I guess, are we taking questions?
Yes, sir.
I was waiting, I
I
thought
do.
you had more.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Gustafson?
Yeah.
Under administrations, the banking charges, can you tell me why the banking charges are much larger than they used to be?
Yes, we got a credit card machine because the past couple of years, we've had some contractors come in and utilize the terminal for after hurricanes and stuff like that. They'll use emergency operations. And a couple of times they wanted to pay with a credit card, and we didn't have a credit card machine. So, we had to bill them, and it took, one of them took almost 5 months to get paid, and it was about over $30,000. So we decided to get a credit card machine, and of course we had to pay the fees going up into it, and we've encouraged some of our tenants to pay by credit card now. So they do that. So those fees should go away now. Yes, sir.
Are the tenants or whoever's using credit card gonna pay their own 4% fees on their transactions?
We get to recoup. It charges them the 4% fee back. It does.
Under publicity, so at one point, we had $100,000 in the original and revised budget, but we only spent $211.89 on the publicity. Is that for us to go out and promote the airport?
It is, and a lot of it is for promotional items like shirts and stuff like that. The past couple of years, we've had a fly-in, and it kind of stopped because of COVID. And that was to get promotional items for the fly-in, and it was to get the public out there and basically get them familiar with the airport.
So you
And-
think that you'll get close to 25,000 when you only spent $211 in September?
Well, it's a possibility if we get back to doing that stuff. And there's several things I want to do to promote the airport.
And the reason I'm asking is, could you do maybe TV ads, billboards?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, we,
Enhanced signs?
Yeah.
absolutely.
And one thing is I've devised a sign plan for the airport to kind of have more directional signs coming into the airport. And I already talked to one architectural firm that would design the signs, and it would be everywhere. It's coming from both Highway 90 and 182 to get people to the airport, to the FBO, to Freeman Jet Center.
And I'll tell you, getting off subject a little bit, IMC has done a fabulous job over the last year with their signs. I mean, I'm in Lafayette, and it has the average wait time near Lafayette General, and they have a big billboard up. So don't just put it in Iberia Parish. I mean, we
Right.
have Franklin. I mean, that side of put one by Lafayette.
Right.
I mean, let them know that we here and open for business too.
Good, yeah.
Thanks,
And
Mo.
it's just funny that you said that because that's what's on our T-shirts now, open for business.
Well, I'll have to trademark that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Mr. Landry?
Mo, can you give us an update on what's going on with the seaplane hangar? I think there was just a bunch of stuff stored in it, or are we using that?
Oh, it's rented out, it's leased out, and actually, Aviation Academy in Louisiana is operating helicopter operations and fixed wing operations out of it. He started out with helicopter operations there, but he bought a place off of Hangar Drive, and he's getting into the fixed wing trainer sector of it now, and it's being used, and we just signed a new lease. It's for 3 years, and it's extended. It's going to be extended if he puts $100,000 into it. So every $100,000 worth of work he puts into it, he can extend it 10 years. And he's already promised to put well over $200,000 in it, which is it's needed.
Every 100,000 you put into it, you can extend it
10 years. Up to 50 years. The FAA puts a cap on 50 years, but it's for every 100,000 he puts into it.
Anyone else?
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Mr. Gert?
So the 4% calculation on the airport's employees is $5,700, and the 5% calculation would be about $9,500. Fund balance wise, beginning 22, The fund balance is 2.9 million. There is a projected surplus of 247,000 for fiscal '22, so that'll bring the fund balance up to 3.1 million. And for fiscal '22, we do have a number of capital items budgeted for, so they are projecting a deficit of 626,000, and that'll bring the fund balance down to about 2.5 million.
Health unit?
Okay, health unit. Health unit is supported by an ad valorem millage. That millage is currently levied at 2.11 mils. Again, that property tax is a renewable tax. That's gonna expire in 2024 with the others. So, revenue-wise, we're looking at, the fund brings in the property tax right at about 1.2 million. There is about $74,000 that's collected each year, from the state revenue sharing. We have a little bit of interest income. So again, I mean, like you look in total revenue in this fund, is approximately $1.3 million. We have a little bit of reimbursement that came from Hurricane Delta in 2022 from the use of the generators when the building, didn't have the power connected. On page 2 of that report, just to kind of go through the totals, and then we'll talk about some of the individual line items. Total expenditures in fiscal '21, right at about a little bit less than $1.5 million. In fiscal '22, a little bit more than $1.5 million, and budgeted for in fiscal '23, 1.8. So going back to page 1, just kind of starting with personal services, you'll see that in fiscal '21, we had about $82,000. You can see that number's declined in fiscal '22 and dropped again in fiscal '23. So in fiscal '22, we've had 2 employees that have left our employment, knowing where the budget was going, knowing that those employees left, got with Larry, and it's like, the employees left, looking at where we have fund balance. We're not gonna have enough to continue our operations. Let's just not fill those positions, and then going forward for '23, don't fill those positions. A long time ago, parish government actually funded one position. Like from my earlier years here, parish government always paid for one position at the health unit. Within the last 2 years, we were actually paying for 3 parish employees, and then there were 2 hospital employees that we were reimbursing. So we were actually paying for 5 employees, one of those being an RN position. And then knowing exactly like what that costs, and then when you look at, how much money we have here and what we're using the money for, and then some of our statutory obligations, just not having enough to complete everything wholly.
One of those positions, the state actually ended up picking the tab up that we used to pay for, correct?
The social worker.
Correct.
Yes.
So she's still there, she's just not being paid from the health unit.
So I don't know if they call it like a social worker's position. I think if I'm remembering correctly, she may have had like a different title to it, but I think that they did like social type work. I'm not 100%. It was like a community like interventionist or something along those lines. So that kind of takes care of, the reduction in the personal services related to those positions. The position where we reimburse the hospital, that was on the 3rd to last line item in the expenditures. It's labeled Iberian Medical Center, and you can see how, last year we spent $166,000. This year we've only spent 10. That nurse's position has been vacant since earlier this year. She's tried to fill it, like going through, for sure, I know of like 2 interview rounds, and not successfully, sought a candidate, I guess, that, fit the realm of what was needed at the health unit. So again, we had the conversation and just said, hey, don't fill it, not knowing exactly how we gonna pull through, with the funds operations. So going back up to the regular expenses, top of page 2, you'll see, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, the 6th line down. We have that money budgeted for the condemnation and the demolition of the houses, the $10,000 per district. So that was budgeted for the first time in fiscal '22. I've moved that money to fiscal '23.
As far as the transportation costs, can you tell me the difference on how we keep going down each year on the transportation costs?
Yeah, so I've shared this with, Larry on a number of occasions. We get so this bill for the transportation is specifically attributable to transporting PEC.
Correct.
Those operations. So that transport happens by statute. That's a sheriff's obligation. So we get a bill each month from the sheriff, for that. The last probably 4 months, if they've transported four people, that's been a lot. In the earlier years, I know.
Okay, tell them keep up the good job.
The earlier years, it was much more. So I'm not 100%.
I mean,
certain.
I'm not,
I did kind of leave
upset
it.
about it, I'm
I did
just-
kind of leave it elevated, just in the event that
Okay.
it would pick back up. It may have to do with staffing. I'm not certain though. So you'll notice the last two line items in the expenditures, the transfer to the rabies fund. Again, we only transfer what is actually needed for those operations, so that's why you'll see the fluctuations between the 150 and the 300 in fiscal 23. It's not because we budgeting, for more. Those expenses were budgeted for in prior years. They've had some trouble with vacancies and that sort of stuff as well. And then the transfer to the criminal justice facility for what's needed medically. Our obligations associated with those parish inmates. So you'll see that big jump. Y'all did entertain an adjustment to that contract earlier this year. I think monthly, we used to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50,000. That monthly amount now is about 90,000. And that was associated with the staffing shortages of nurses and those sorts of things.
but I believe the administration's
Kinda-
working on a plan to maybe even bring that further down, correct?
We
I'm putting
did
it on
speak
you.
with Iberia Medical Center. I think I'll have that conversation in private then.
Any other questions?
No, I just want to make a comment before, I know Paul's fixing to get at it. The $500,000 wasn't just the reimbursement of the medical. We also have 140,000 in there that we as a council approved in 22 and carrying over in 23. So it's not the full $500,000, Mr. Landry.
Mr. Landry?
I guess mine's gonna be directed to Andy, because I've heard him talk about this. Andy, are you saying that we actually have to have a health unit according to the state? Could that be a service that we contract out to someone else? Well, at the rate we're going, another 600,000 in 24 and a 600,000 in 25 gets us to the 1.2 million of the bond payment. And if the people say no to renewing this tax, there won't be any money.
Paul, you're talking about the health unit itself.
Yeah, we had talked one time, and I'd asked you if there was the possibility that maybe we could contract it out to someone else, a business that kind of does that type of stuff. I'm not saying how,
I think we're obligated to have a health unit. How we operate that health unit may be subject to some smart
Maneuver?
budgeting. Look to see if it can be privatized. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I was involved in privatization of the detention center in Lincoln Parish, and it worked for a while, but it didn't work very well long-term. It was returned back to Parish, but I mean, we certainly could look at it, and that is, I hate to keep leaning on Iberia Medical Center, but that's at least something to look at. If somebody has a particular plan, but I'd be glad to. And look, the other thing is just get you a little small group and start putting your heads together and see what you might can come up with. And we certainly be willing to try to make it work through the cooperative endeavor agreements or other things.
and I know we've been lucky enough, Park and Rec has helped us out with the RV park, and how many times can you go to the well with the hospital, where, maybe they won't have as good a year here or there, and it is concerning, and then in 2 years, we will be at the point of having one of our collections for the millage and that's when we're supposed to get alarm, Kimberly?
So actually this one, so if you're looking at fund balance, at the end of fiscal '23, it's about 2.4. So, you know, if expenditures would stay the same in fiscal '24 as they are in fiscal '23, which the only thing that would change likely is gonna be the 140,000, you know, assuming that that's like a one-time. So, you know, your expenses would be down to about 1.7. You know, we could only afford one more year at this level of a deficit in order for us to continue our cash flow.
So it would affect the kids, it would affect the dogs, and it would affect the
inmates.
the inmates. Well, we would basically give all the money to the inmates.
Basically.
Plus, if it goes up, then we'd pull that out the general fund, because the royalty fund's not there.
Look, there,
I was
that's,
looking at you.
that
know you
expense, Mr. Landry,
felt
that
it.
expense is probably gonna continue. It may stabilize, but, you know, the traveling nurses have set those costs skyrocketing. I mean, you know, Leon was here and talked about the effect that that's had on the hospital. It's the same effect, there at the detention center. You know, if we don't have another outbreak of COVID or a horrible flu season, and, you know, maybe those, could stabilize, but, they're gonna continue to go up.
But early on in the year, we were at one point looking 1.1, 1.2 million, right? With that contract, he said that it could
Right.
get over 1 million, and now it looks like it came down a little bit.
So we do share, you're talking about the medical contract?
Correct.
So we share the medical contract with the sheriff. So not all of the inmates in our, you know, in the parish jail are parish inmates.
DOT.
Parish government is responsible for parish pretrial detainees. You know, once they're adjudicated and they DOC, the sheriff is collecting, you know, a mandate from the state for their housing costs. That cost is a comprehensive cost that includes the medical, but he also houses, you know, inmates from other jurisdictions as well.
And he collects 100% of that?
Oh, yeah, we don't get any of the money from the mandates. We actually pay him a mandate, so then you know, we're gonna talk about that, in the next fund, or 2 funds later, something like that. You know, y'all, earlier this year, y'all increased, you know, the mandate expense from the minimum, according to state statute of $3.50 per day, up to the $4. So we're responsible for the $3.50, but we're also responsible for the full cost of utilities. We're responsible for the full cost of building repairs. We're responsible for,
Didn't he ask for 450?
Well, just to make a point, and I'll let it go back to Mr. Landry to finish. But at one point, Paul had brought up a good idea about selling the inmates toothpaste Skittles, and
Actually-
it didn't pay.
No, actually,
I'm good,
it
Mr. Chairman.
passed. Natalie, I believe, is the one that sponsored it, and it's actually on the books, but I think Lewis just said he wasn't gonna collect it. So what we put on the books was when an individual hits confinement, and they set up an account for him, for the family to mail him money so he can get some Twinkies. The first, I think it was $25 that they deposit would come to parish government to pay for the basic box that he gets in the very beginning. But that's something that maybe we need to, when we talk about the cost of the foods, let them know we want our money first.
We were told by the former administration that they put that resolution on the shelf.
Correct.
I mean, that could be something that we can maybe get with the new administration and see if they would cooperate in enforcing that.
Sheriff,
Anyone else?
Kimberly had got a phone call from St. Landry Parish asking us what our charges were. If you remember, Kimberly, when you
I
were
remember
there.
getting the call, I don't remember exactly who from.
Yeah.
Look, everybody's tried that, and it's pretty hard to pass on, because once they figure it out, they put very little money in there.
Yeah,
in the account.
absolutely.
But it's certainly worth looking at. I will say this, you know, Kimberly did a great job of, I mean, at the end of the month, they look and see how many of those prisoners were our prisoners, how many were, from other locations, and we only pay for those that are our
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah, good.
So,
Good job, Kim.
Curious what that percentage is. And I know it fluctuates.
Yeah.
Every week, every month. I'm just curious.
So I went back a couple years. So long time ago, that number was established at 23%. Like the sheriff's responsibility was established at 23%. So we were essentially picking up about 75. 75, 25.
of the
And so we had a meeting, and some comments were made. So I went back it's been some time since I've done it, but I went back like 2 whole fiscal years. And keep in mind, COVID was kind of in there, so at that time, even though the jail maybe wasn't completely full, they weren't allowing, just to kind of keep the numbers down. So not that they weren't allowing, but, they were trying to keep the numbers down, from the population and the gathering and all that. So they had kind of said, yeah, those numbers are lower, but it's because of COVID, kind of thing. So when we did the calculation, I want to say it was about 60% parish. It was about 60% parish. And so, we tried adjusting the numbers. So when you try to adjust from 25% to 60%, and that additional burden is, going on the other party.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't know about that, So, he kind of countered. So we landed up agreeing to 65-35 for this year. But I mean, we continue to monitor it, and at the end of this year.
So that's something you do every year, so let's look at this thing.
Well, it hadn't been done for a really, really long time. I did it I want to say 2 years ago. We did look at it again last year, and we are I have it calculated all the way through. I want to say July's numbers, right now. And then at the end of this year, we're going to have to address it again. I don't think it's fair to the parish and its citizens.
What is classified a parish inmate? They reside in the parish, Andy?
No.
Or they were arrested in the parish?
They would be pretrial inmates waiting trial here in this jurisdiction. It doesn't matter where they are, it's that they have a local charge. The sheriff can also house for other parishes.
Right.
Other parishes who don't have the same amount of jail capacity.
Right.
And also the sheriff contracts with the state, and from time to time holds state prisoners who are serving state time. So you have a grand mix in there. But when we talk about local, we're talking about people who are facing charges here in Iberia Parish.
Okay.
I got you. Any other questions for Ms. Gurr? Thank you, Mr. Sheila. You want to finalize?
Sure. So fund balance wise, we started fiscal 22 with about 3.2 million. We are projecting a deficit of about 270,000 for fiscal 22, so that'll bring our fund balance down to 2.9. And then in fiscal 23, we're looking at $500,000, on the deficit. So that'll bring our fund balance down to 2.4.
2 years, Paul. Economic development?
Wait, the 4%, it's not much, but a
Yeah.
couple
Trying to
dollars.
push too hard.
$585 for the 4%, and then $975 for the 5%.
975?
Yes, sir.
Economic development?
Okay. Economic development, there's a 1 cent sales tax that is levied within the boundaries of the economic development district. As you look at line 1, you'll see that, in fiscal 21, we collected a little bit more than 1.6. It looks like we're going to bring in right at about 1.7, and I budgeted that number flat for fiscal 23.
No, it's
And then the interest earnings is the other larger revenue that's budgeted for there. So just kind of across the years, but about 1.7, 1.8 in total revenues. So expenditure-wise, we still have the appropriation set aside for Amador Lewis Street widening, which is approximately $2.5 million. Keep in mind that a portion of this appropriation will be needed to cover the parish's match relative to Highway 675 roundabout. So we did get some numbers earlier this year, and those numbers had kind of gone up a little bit. So we still don't have definitive numbers on exactly what those costs are going to be. But in our mind, or in my mind, that Highway 675, we've never set the appropriation, to the books. But once we do that, my anticipation is that it's going to come out of that budgeted line item. And that's kind of like the last budgeted line item that we have relative to the bonds that were issued. I want to say they were issued in 2014.
correct.
So that's the last of the bond proceeds. Still holding on to those bond proceeds. We have to go through an arbitrage calculation each year, which is kind of a pain. So we have to do that. I have to provide some information to this arbitrage, to this firm, so they can do the arbitrage calculation, and it entails, a filing, with the IRS. So,
What's the maturity date on that bond? Is it 2023, 24?
there is one that
There's
will be
one of them,
paid
right.
for in 20.
You don't remember how much of that bond payment is for that bond that'll mature next year?
I have it,
Is it 900? I thought it was less
yeah.
than that.
But then
yeah.
this, but
It's
then, the-
950,
yeah, but
it's
then the
950.
next bond is gonna increase.
but not a whole lot. So, in 2024, our bond payments will be about the 1.6 million, but in 2025, they drop down to about 837.
Because what scares me in here is we have no, I mean, and again, the fund balance is still relatively healthy, but over the last 3 or 4 years, our capital improvements have really trended down. Without state dollars, the lights were off.
State and federal dollars is what's doing.
I do have a question on AIDA on page 4. The increase, is that for a particular project that they're doing?
So on page 4, so many years ago, the council appropriated, I want to say about 312,000. I don't know why that number's sticking in my head, but 312,000. And so that is the 25% match for what AIDA is doing in Progress Point. And so I think
Okay.
it's relative to water and sewer lines. And that's what that is. So what I've done is I think that we're gonna pay about $100,000, and so I've just rolled the remainder, the 144, into next year's budget. So we'll have to continue to carry that over. I don't know exactly how long it'll take before that, project, is actually completed.
I mean, other than the Lobby Road project that we did, Lobby Bridge, I mean, we've been pretty good. I mean, if we can just get the collections up a little more, and you're starting to see the trend just a little bit. So, hey, look, I'm positive. 4 or 5 positive months, I'll take that other than continued loss. I'm good.
Anyone else?
Y'all don't want me to go through the rest of the fund?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, we do have a little bit of money left over for the Highway 675 roundabout engineering fees were committed by the parish. I want to say about 90 to 100,000. That $1,100 still remains to be spent. The next category, parish government recently was awarded a state grant through the Treasury for Lobby Road improvements. It is $400,000, so when we got the estimate back from the engineers, I want to say the total would have been about $470,000, including the engineering fees. And then the engineer also identified 2 additional areas, one on either side of a bridge that would have needed to be like two failures, that accounted for another $35,000. So you can see the full appropriation in fiscal '23 of about $105,000. So we'll get,
That's the road, yeah.
yeah, but I think the 2 failure areas, I want to say they like on either side of the bridge. But are there 2 bridges
No,
on that
just-
road?
Just
There's
one bridge, but
Okay.
the Lobby Road one is the gravel portion, which is on the other side of Captain Key. The bridge is on the south side of Captain Key.
And that's what she's talking about. She's talking about the one on the south side.
I thought this was the road project.
This is
That
road,
is the road project.
Yeah, that's the road. The bridge one
The bridge will
is,
be on the south side, on the other side.
yeah. So the next category, we have if y'all recall, a couple years ago, we had installed those, the lighting down, Emerald Hall going into the airport. So that $13,000 is the electricity bill for those, streetlights each year. The next category is the bridge that Chad was just mentioning, on Library Road. So earlier this year, y'all had approved $622,000. We're showing some as being expended in '22 and then carrying forward the remainder into '23. Next two categories, the 100,000 and the 100,000 for the sewer lift station relocation. Yay.
Done. I fought for 4 years for that, finally done. Now it's in
And
District
then-
6.
And then the 50,000 for,
All right.
the 50,000 for Estes Road. The next category is a state facility planning grant that we have to bore under Highway 90 and bring sewer lines to Premium Fishing. That project will be completed shortly.
Oh, they done.
It's close.
I think they finished.
Cost category,
Yeah, the equipment's gone. Yeah.
Can we back up just one
Oh,
more?
sure.
Just to go back to that 50,000, if you remember early in sewer district, their 15,000 was a match with us. It was a total of
Right.
65,000 for that.
Correct.
That project.
yeah. So labeled under economic development, you see a kind of like a catch-all, you know, we have some professional services, the indirect costs, the collection fees, you know, that those are all just regular things, that we incur each and every year. The principal and interest payments, again, of about 1.6, and then not until fiscal 25, we'll see that, reduced down. And just to kind of follow up on the debt, you know, the first debt we're gonna pay off, here shortly. The second debt was issued in 2014, and that one is on a variable interest rate. Interest rate, you know, kind of, I want to say it goes up to maybe 4, maybe a little bit higher than 4. I talked to Jason last year about refinancing that. And then there were a couple things, you know, Jason didn't feel like the economy was like the best thing, and that we probably couldn't have gotten a decent, you know, interest rate, but also the collections from the sales tax he felt was a hindrance as well, because we not, you know, a lot of times, you know, when they go to try and get this stuff approved, you know, they looking at, you know, your repayment stream, and, you know, we didn't have enough growth. At one point, you know, the tax was bringing in, I want to say in a high year, it may have even been upwards of 2.4 million. So, you know, in those years, which is probably when that bond was actually let, you know, we had a strong repayment, and then we don't. And then now, I mean, with interest rates, you know, kind of coming up, if we actually like go out, you know, to get it refinanced, we'd probably be at the same thing. So then we'd incur all the expenses associated with the refinancing and probably, you know, have the same result.
Most of those bonds, though, were road bonds that we did at Admiral Dahl and Avenue A and B, right? Wasn't that overlays that were part of those bond issuements in 2014?
So there was a little bit that was paid out of the Economic Development District relative to the roads, and we called it the straightening of Admiral Dahl.
Correct.
There was some money that was spent on that. Some of the money, you know, a big chunk of the bonds, like in the first issue, was given to the port, and the port, you know, had, I want to say, about $5 million.
The airport?
No,
Or
the Port of Iberia.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a number of stuff that, you know, probably $3-4 million worth of projects that happened at the airport. I remember something, you know, about a taxi lane at one point, you know, so that would have been, you know, patching to the cement. And then also you'll see the appropriation to IE of the $67,000. So that's their regular operating expenses. So we already talked about top of page 4, that line item to IETA being the match for that capital outlay project. And then the last low category is the area access road project. So that is state funded. We finishing up on the actual road project with Glen Leger, which is the bulk of the expenses in 22. We do have, there was a pipeline that needs to be lowered. We just got that bill. So that's going to be submitted to facility planning, but you can see, you know, in fiscal 22, it's going to cost us, you know, about $1,000, you know, to this fund. And then we've carried forward all of, the grant proceeds into next year. So we have about $5 million, to spend, you know, in that area, in that vicinity. So, and one thing that we had checked on earlier is to see if, some of this money would be able to be used at Highway 675. And Richard Minville had reminded us that, you know, there was a letter that was drafted and sent to Mr. Lee, our project manager, at facility planning, whereby we had told him that, you know, possibly we would use some of that money on the Highway 675 roundabout. So in the event that we need more money, this might be an area that we could actually tap into.
From fund balance?
No, it's not fund balance. This is the state facility planning. So, you know,
Wouldn't we have a match with it though?
This one does not have a match. This one was from one of the earlier ones, so.
Just wanna make sure that Lewis Street stays where it's at, you know?
That's the beauty of this one with no
I
match.
know when you was going over Lewis Street, that 2.5 million, Mr. Landry here, I seen his pencil kinda shaking.
He wasn't the only one.
Don't let
All
that
right,
money
all
stay
right, we're
there.
getting-
It's a
getting
cost
all
savings
that.
measure for us.
The loan you talked about is the variable.
Yes.
It's 4% right now, you said?
No.
Oh,
don't
it's
believe-
maxed out? It has a cap?
Yes, there is a cap on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't, last week I brought all of my
That's good.
information. This week I didn't bring all of my information, but I can pull it. I can pull the amortization schedule
If you
and
don't
send
mind,
it to y'all.
shoot me that tomorrow, because they're driving interest rates up into a recession, which I don't understand, but just make sure. Anybody else? All right, we'll move along. Criminal justice?
Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
So y'all good on fund balance?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So the jail fund,
It'll take Warren's money, it's
jail,
gonna go
the larger of the, well, not really the larger, but, you know, the revenue, direct revenue in this fund, is the ad valorem millage levy. It's currently levied at 2.06 for fiscal '22. We do have constitutional authority on that particular levy. And then we also collect the state revenue sharing, which is, you know, tied to that ad valorem millage. And then the larger portion of the revenue stream that comes in, this fund is from transfers from other funds. So you have the transfer that comes in from health unit, the transfer from public buildings to cover all of the building expenses, and then we do balance off what we don't have in that fund with a transfer from the royalty fund. Expenditure wise, I mean, everything is kind of consistent year to year. You'll notice the spike on page 2 of that report, contracted services. So that is the medical contract, you know, increasing from 460 to 616 to 746. And then on page 3, you'll notice, like just to go over the utilities. I mean, y'all would probably be amazed if y'all saw the electricity bill at that particular
I know the
building.
water's outrageous.
The water is, but the electricity is as well. Yeah. So I mean, you know, just the gas charges, we're looking at 100,000 a year. The electricity has gone up to, you know, $280,000-$300,000 a year. And then the water bill, you know, upwards of $200,000. So keep in mind that that is a combined water and sewer. Sewage District Number 1 does provide the services in that particular location of the parish. So they are, you know, that is billed through LAWCO on the water bill, but that revenue comes back to the sewer fund for that service that they charge there. So when we talk about the flow, that, you know, that's a portion of what they're collecting on that flow. And then the last line item in that category, you'll see the payments that we make to, so it's labeled sheriff, so keep in mind, you know, Andy kind of tapped in, you know, that we're paying Iberia Sheriff. We don't only pay Iberia Sheriff, you know, some of our inmates are at Lafayette, some of our inmates are at St. Martin, St. Mary, but we do have some inmates, and, you know, it's not a lot of inmates, but, you know, probably like, I don't know, I'm gonna say about 10, maybe even less than 10, that are actually like housed, I guess it's up north, you know, in a private prison, you know, somewhere. So, and those are, when they're housed, so evidently there's an agreement between the 16 JDC, because what we get billed out of St. Martin and St. Mary is, you know, kind of consistent with the $4 rate. But what we pay to the other sheriffs is the $26.39 a day for those inmates.
What happens with the municipalities like the city of New Iberia? Those negotiations are made with the sheriff and the
sheriff.
mayor?
Yes.
Okay. Again, and that goes back to the sheriff.
Correct.
He gets that revenue.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Mr. Landry?
Kimberly, would we be able to take the 102,000 for natural gas and transfer that to the biomedical facility since they don't have gas?
We could maybe use that new generator.
Yeah.
That way when we have a storm, they get power first for us.
Any other questions?
I think you get a kick out of that one.
Yeah, I got one. Lowering tax to 2.06. That's the percentage of the general fund?
Yes,
Correct.
so general alimony is levied,
Right.
and that revenue stream goes into our general fund. And then this tax is labeled, exempt municipalities is how it's labeled, but it's called the criminal tax, and it's half of the millage that's levied in your general alimony.
Okay, in your history, have you ever seen that percentage change? It's state statute, right? Okay, I'll talk to my legislator. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So we have a grant that was recently awarded through facility planning. Y'all actually just approved a resolution at last meeting, I believe, and this is it right here. So 114,000 is going to come through the state facility planning office, and we can spend 154,000, and it is for jail improvements. So we'll have to identify a project and get that qualified over. So you know, to do $150,000 would cost us $40,000, which
That's a good deal.
kind of a bargain.
Yeah.
And then we have a small budget that we account for juvenile expenses. We actually have not incurred any juvenile expenses to date. That they're really expensive though. I mean, if you look quickly. So,
Holidays
yeah,
are
so I
coming
mean,
up,
like
I
if you look
should've
at that
said it.
line item of housing, in last year, $16,000, and that was for a very short period of time, or maybe 2 months, something along those lines. So fund balance wise, on page 4, we started the year with 124,000. We're looking at $100,000 deficit for fiscal '22, and then we have a small surplus of $2,000. You know, leaving us about $26,000 in fund balance. So hopefully we've overestimated some of these numbers, and that number, you know, becomes a little bit higher.
That electricity goes up any.
So the 4% calculation for the 2 employees that are accounted for in this fund, the 4% is about $1,200, and then the 5% is about $2,000.
Any questions? Probably not.
Okay.
Move along, please.
Public buildings fund is supported by an ad valorem millage. That millage is currently levied at maximum 4.76 mils. It is a renewable tax that will expire in 2024.
Yep.
So you can see it's bringing in right at about 2.7 million in each of the years. We also do collect, you know, approximately $68,000 worth of state revenue sharing. And then the very last line item in that fund, you'll see where the juror and witness fee fund has been transferring over $200,000. That is eligible to go towards courthouse security operations, and we do spend more than the $200,000. But that fund is subject to a minimum. We have to leave at least $50,000 in that fund, and in next year is when we're going to actually reach that minimum. So that's why that number's decreasing down to $100,000 in fiscal '23. So top of page 2, you'll see this is the courtroom renovations budget. It's at the very, very bottom of page 1, but the totals are on page 2. So we actually expended right at about $15,000 in fiscal '21. The total of that project is going to be about $776,000 in fiscal '22, and we don't have anything budgeted for in fiscal '23. Under courthouse. We kind of have them labeled in this fund all by the different building locations. So page 3, kind of towards the top of the page, just to kind of go through the totals, and then we can kind of look at some of the individual line items. Fiscal '21 expended 1.3 million. Fiscal '22, that number dropped down to about $1.2 million, and then fiscal '23, you know, a little bit lower than $1.2 million, and that's essentially attributable to that contract payments line item. In fiscal '22, it's dropping down by about $100,000, so that's accounting for that decrease there. And then looking into fiscal '23, we don't have anything budgeted for contract type payments. We do have a facility planning grant that was awarded a couple years back to make some improvements to the elevator, the courthouse elevator, specifically the jail elevator. There's actually 3 elevators in this building. There's one that goes to 2nd floor. There's one that goes all the way to 4th. But then there's one on the back side. Like when you walk into the basement, you kind of keep going through that glass door, and it's around there. They use it to bring the inmates up to 2nd floor. So that's what that's for. So the the annex building, top of page 4, total expenses 130, 153 to 154. So kind of the increase there is again on the electricity line item. The Roy building, so the building directly behind the courthouse, the sheriff was housed in that building. Expenses, 9,000 in fiscal 21, 12,000 and 12,000 each of the next 2 years. The storage facility is the facility that was built to house the clerk's records. 8,000 expended in fiscal 21 and 9,000 in each of the next 2 years. Courthouse security. Middle of page 5, 276,000 expended in fiscal 21, 274 and 280 in the next 2 years. Labeled under sheriff, police, bottom of page 5, 33,000, 662,000 in fiscal 22, and then almost 78,000 budgeted for in fiscal 23. So the first year, 21, that was the port building. And then in fiscal 22, you got a combination of the port building and the new building on Admiral Dahl. So we bought the building, so obviously that's the 600,000. And then the fiscal 23, you'll have only the operations at the Admiral Dahl location. Kind of the overlap there was on the utilities. Like, you know, the sheriff was still housed at the port location, so we continue to pay utilities there for about a quarter. And he was also in the Admiral Dahl facility. So, and I guess the thing that we don't really know, like here, is on the repairs. You know, parish government is responsible for the repairs on that building, but, you know, it's kind of new to us, you know, maybe older to somebody else, but, you know, we don't really have a good track record of knowing, like, what we would need there.
Kim,
Yes, sir.
1,700 to date on lawn care and 20 grand, for next year.
So you're looking in courthouse?
The courthouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, long time ago, the lawn care was contracted out. And you'll see we had no budget. So we moved some budgeted money into that line item, I wanna say in maybe August of this year. So, the 1,700 is the actual number as of the day that this report was generated, but, I wanna say it's 1,700 a month times, I wanna say it's 5 months. So that's the 8,500. We'll actually expend 8,500 having that contract, in fiscal 22, and then a full year of those operations in fiscal 23.
20?
20.
Okay.
Any other questions? The Roy building.
Building is vacant, right?
Almost.
What's left in there?
That sheriff still have a little bit to get out of it.
So we shouldn't have any expense next year at all?
Well, I don't
We'd have
know
to,
that. We're gonna have utilities for sure.
Why? If the building's
Well,
vacant?
we might have someone else moving into the building too. I'm not exactly sure yet.
Scott,
That's Sam.
Kim, did you go over, I didn't hear you, I might have been looking at some of that stuff. Public Works Administration?
no, I haven't gone that far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because at one time, Dutch Gosnell, we were funding the all of that out of public. I thought when we did some
Out
of
of
the,
public building?
yeah, when we did some of the upgrades to Dutch Gosnell, we took that from this fund. Now, that
Yes.
could have been a couple of years ago, but at
Yes.
one time, we were funding some of that out of there.
Yeah, so the construction
Correct. And
was
the
all
Aquar.
funded there. But now that, you know, it's fully operational, the utilities, we share the utilities, if that's what you going
Well,
forward
right,
on
I
the
was
utilities?
trying to figure out trying to find the utility costs
Yeah.
in that.
So the utilities are shared, or maybe, maybe they're all out of drainage and like streetlights are coming out of the road fund.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, that's what I'm remembering.
That's another conversation we need to have when we get to road fund about streetlights, but I'm glad you kind of brought that up. But, go ahead and explain the generator program deal.
Okay.
I mean, I briefly remember that, but I know we had talked about it.
Okay, so there was a grant that was awarded through the Governor's Office of Homeland Security
Correct.
to install a generator at the Public Works facility. And so we would have to spend 112 to get reimbursed 100, no, we would spend 150 to get reimbursed 112. So the overall cost of the generator would be $40,000 to run that facility. And there's something that happened with the generator piece. I know that they said that all these locations were approved, and then the governor's office came back and said, you needed to write an amendment and some different things. And so I'm not 100% certain exactly where it's at. I'm just carrying it forward, you know, in the event that,
You and I,
all the paperwork is squared away.
while we're talking about Public Works facility, you and I had a conversation about a sand machine to be placed at the facility. Have we gotten anywheres with that? Because while we're here, we can tie that to this fund.
Yes, Dexter's looking at it, you should have it by the time we.
To make a budget amendment that night,
Yes.
okay. I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, yeah, so the top of page 6 is the transfer to the jail fund, which we had already kind of addressed that. So recreation, under recreation, New Iberia Veterans is being, you know, the daily operations are being managed by the Parks and Recreation Fund. We are responsible for some building expenses, so that's why you'll see that 20,000 there. The insurance, parish government's responsibility as well, so that's what that's budgeted for. And then the transfer to recreation, that agreement, the way that it was executed, whatever, you know, they gonna capture their revenues and the expenses, and this 15,000 is used to cover any shortage, if in the event that they would be short. You can see in last year, they were short about 11, so I just estimated that it would be 15. It may not be that, though. Generate Veterans number 1, which is the Veterans Building in City Park of Generate, so on Main Street. So we have expense of, right at about 6,000 in fiscal 21. That expense increased to 18,000 in fiscal 22 as a result of the roof project that happened there. That was about $9,000, and then about $5,600 is accounted for in fiscal 23's budget. Lydia Veterans is another building that is being operated by the Recreation Department. So again, here, all we have is, you know, a handful of line items. About $1,000 expended in fiscal 21, about $1,000 in fiscal 22, and you'll notice $11,000. So I had a conversation with Tammy during the budget preparation process. So normally we budget about $5,000 each year for building type stuff. They do need to replace an AC, and they've gotten prices, and that price is about approximately $10,000. And it may be more than one AC. I'm not 100% certain exactly on the particulars about it. But so basically I said, well, so we'll just take the money out of this year and move it to next year.
Excuse me,
Sure.
you said the revenue from anything under Parks and Rec for both of, or I guess all 3 veteran buildings goes to Parks and Rec?
Correct.
So the revenue from New Iberia Veterans and Lydia Veterans, those 2 are managed by the Parks Department. That's why there's no revenue in those line items. So those buildings are being rented, but when we went through Parks budget last year, there's gonna be a caption in their budget that's labeled New Iberia Veterans and Lydia, yes.
And we have not received any revenue at all from Generate.
So Generate Veterans, number 1, the problem was well, Larry, you might be able to help out too.
Actually,
They had, the roof needed to be repaired, and I think there's some other stuff on the inside too that may be needed.
I'm glad you brought that
Okay.
up. I don't mean, I'm sorry now.
Finish?
I don't think I was answered.
Yeah,
I mean, my
there is-
question was, there's been no
There's been
revenue at
no
all?
revenue. Right. So the veterans themselves were collecting the revenue and paying some expenses. In the past, that's why if you look under fiscal 21, you'll see we were essentially paying the insurance and the utility bills. They were collecting the revenue and they were paying for certain expenses out there. And then they had got with the administration and they wanted to transfer over the building. You know, I guess as some of the veterans become older, you know, it becomes a burden, you know, for those daily operations. And that's when, and this is the little piece that I do know. I mean, Larry probably knows much more than what I know. That the roof needed some repairs. So then they came here, hey, you know, the roof needs to be repaired. We made the appropriation, and that was just recently finished. So,
Right.
and then I was told that there was something else that needed to happen on the inside before we could rent it.
And are we taking it over or they're keeping it?
We,
We are.
yes.
So is that going
That's
into parks now or no?
Well, as of right now, no, but hopefully, the way it sounds, it may end up going in the parks as well. But just for your information, as far as the roof that needs to be repaired, we need to repair. I went there for a function with the veterans, I guess, 2 weeks ago. And they running a very nice shift.
They run a
It's
tight
very,
ship.
very,
Yep.
very organized.
Only thing, Larry, so that project, yeah, they repaired the roof, but there was some damages on the inside.
Exactly.
So, but that was, I thought that should have been, God bless you. I thought it should have been part of the project, cause I had some of the veterans ask me, I'm like,
I seen it.
well,
I
that
seen it.
should have been done when they repaired the roof.
No.
I mean, not the same contractor, but in the same
Exactly.
scope of work.
Well, no, they
Why?
didn't include it in the they didn't include it in the roof project.
That's what I don't understand.
But
What?
it needs to be done.
It needs to be done,
And it will be done.
cause it can't be rented
Well,
until,
we can rent it, but
I
that,
mean,
that
but you
part
got,
has to be-
I mean, you got wall, I mean, you got some
Well, you
damage
know how
in
this
it.
building is separate, how they separate the building from the front and the big part where the kitchen is. But
So
it's
what is your plan for that?
to repair it, to get it repaired, to get Michael Broussard to get it out and get it repaired.
Okay, I hope we get that soon.
Hopefully this year.
Did it all in one, we have a change order.
Exactly.
We have a change order.
All right.
Yeah. It should have been, whoever did it, I think should have done it all in one, which is
Well,
probably
it's
Mr. Guest,
like
all right?
the roof person, from what I'm understanding, the guy that did the roof don't do finish work on the inside, you know.
Yeah. I agree.
Anyone else?
And you definitely need finish work. whereas-
No, it needs to be done.
Okay.
Mr. Garrett?
So Robert B. Green,
Come
kind of the
back.
middle of page 8, 32,000 expended in fiscal 21. In fiscal 22, that number dropped down to, we're projecting about a $2,000 net expenditure. And then in fiscal 23, we're looking at a net expenditure of about $5,000. So fiscal 21, we were completing the construction that required a match through facility planning. And then you're looking at pure operations, running the facility and then just regular expenses in fiscal 22 and fiscal 23. Next caption is Sugarcane Festival Building, top of page 9. 168,000 was expended in fiscal 21, fiscal 22 about 80,000, and then fiscal 23 approximately 93,000. So there was some extra work that was done, repairs to the building. I believe that was the year that the council set aside the $75,000 to understand, why the basement was flooding and some other things. And so then that's what that additional expense was associated in that year. Generette Veterans number 2. So the second veterans home in Generette is actually on Martin Luther King Drive. Approximately 5,000 expended in fiscal 21 and 7,000 in each of the next 2 years. The appropriation to Sugarina, 74,000 in fiscal 21, and then 62 and 60 in 22 and 23. The next category, very last line item on page 9, it says recreation. So that is the transfer to the recreation department, and that is for the transfer switches in Ward 8 and Willowwood. And then the last two little categories, we have small levels of expense that cover insurance only. We do own the building that the Lydia Cancer Society, or Lydia Cancer Association, I think, is housed in on Highway 83. And the last line item, there's a building that Parish Government owns that's located at Pepperplex. That's the insurance on those two buildings. So. And there's a movable building that was moved to Pepperplex.
That was Mr. Landry's office, isn't it?
That's right, it used to be my office. No, that's the one they still use. It was the tourist building that was over there by the hotel. And when they made all that change, they brought it out there. We could probably offer it to Freddie. Tell Freddie, well, he has to take this building if we're gonna give him Jane Street.
I mean, both of these buildings, the Lydia Cancer Association has been in that building since I started working here in 2006. They are responsible for almost everything. They're responsible for utility. The only thing that we're responsible for is, I think we are responsible for the roof, and the roof was actually repaired a couple of years ago. So they essentially, have a brand new building. So like,
I wanna give it to him.
I doubt seriously that the building's coming back to us, in any fashion. So, I know, in the past y'all have looked for, opportunities to get some of the, the unused, property off of, our rolls. This would be one, and then, the Pepperplex's building as well. Pepperplex's is a movable building, so I think that one's a little bit easier. The one at the one in Lydia, is a building that's on the ground, and I don't know if, so there's, actually the Lydia Veterans Building is next door to the Lydia Fire Station, so I don't know if that's all one tract of property or not, and how difficult that would become, relative to the property.
You're only 5 feet apart.
Yeah, exactly.
How you gonna divide the property?
It's gonna be tough.
You have to be 5 feet from the property.
I have a question about the New Iberia veterans. You taking money out of recreation, it's probably gonna go to one of y'all. We legal right now? I thought we couldn't spend money in the city, not the managing part. I understand that part.
It's a parish facility.
That's for
parish-owned facility.
So going into the city limits, we're still good?
Yeah, we
just like
Sugar
the
King
Sugar King
Festival
Festival
building,
too.
we have several buildings in the city
Yeah.
limits. The courthouse,
But the money coming out of recreation is the concern, not that we own the buildings.
So it's best if you don't think about city, parish, think about who owns the building. That's the better way to look at it. And so the Parks and Recreations handles that, they get all the incomes. To the extent that the income doesn't cover the cost of repairs, then we pay for that. So they're really not out.
So they're just managing
Yeah,
it,
they're-
saving us money.
No, I wasn't worried about the management part, I just wanted to make
Because
sure.
we have to have somebody
Oh,
managing all the.
Specific.
That was a real problem, we shut generator down. We talk about selling it.
but the operational cost is coming out of the public buildings.
That's
It's a parish
though.
public building.
Meaning.
So I mean,
The text
regardless if it's in the
specifically
city limits, generator,
Not
wherever,
city
yeah.
That's why I say,
It specifically says.
look at it as to who owns the building.
Correct.
So you're violating GAP principles, probably. All right,
So fund balance wise, we started fiscal '22 with about 5.3. Our budgeted deficit, our projected deficit for fiscal '22, about 1.3 million. Keep in mind that the large portion of this is, buying, the sheriff's facility on Amaldahl for this year, so that brings our fund balance down to about 4 million. And then in fiscal '23, you notice, no capital, for the most part. So this is purely almost operational, $300 and something thousand, so that'll bring our fund balance down to 3.6. If you look up a little bit, you'll see where our expenses for this fund, right at about 3.5. We almost can't go any lower. So, again,
Well,
we got a deficit budgeted for.
We know we
and-
still have some issues here at the courthouse that we hadn't even addressed in this deal that can cost us well more than that in expenses. So we need to plan for that definitely. I mean, we've done a lot of work to this courthouse, but there's a lot of issues this courthouse still has. I mean, we talked about the chillers the other day. I mean, have we gotten the answer back?
Right there. Well, we close to getting an answer. We have an answer. but
A
we don't have
replacement or a repair?
Replacement.
So that's not even reflected in the '23 budget. So we know at some point next year, we're gonna have to come for,
1 million.
So the 4% calculation, on the employees that are accounted for in the public building maintenance
That's
fund is
gonna come
about
from the restore.
$3,500, and 5% calculation would be about $5,800.
Dude, we're having a meeting with you.
4% is about $3,500, and then $5,800.
all right.
So before we go into raw,
Over
see,
5 year period.
kind of the two funds,
3,500.
35.
58.
5,800.
So before we go into the raw OC fund, like just looking at, two of the funds that we looked at earlier, health unit and public building, those are probably our two, each year there's like one fund that just kind of like stands out as, I guess you could call it, poor performance. But, probably the more strapped of the two is going to be health unit, but, running close second is going to be our public building fund.
Haven't even got the waste fund yet. Solid waste.
Well, solid waste, it looks horrible, but it's because of the $1 million that's been set aside. So knowing that $1 million probably won't be expended anytime in the near future, kind of gives you a little bit more life, but, it's not, it's grave as well.
Royalty fund?
Sure. So royalty fund, this fund's main revenue stream, which becomes not so main, anymore, is the money that we get from the state, relative to the royalties. We are due a check any day now. What is today? The 17th? Yeah. So between now and the end of the month, we'll actually know what the third quarter is. So, pray for some good numbers for sure. Cause the first 2 quarters, amounted to a total of $134,000 combined.
I'm thinking double that,
Combined.
this check.
That's not
Huge.
even getting to the 300.
$100 barrel.
If it comes in at that, I'm
They want an
decor-
all Iberia Parish sweet all.
if it does
That
that
doesn't mean
much, I'm
anything.
decorating my door.
No, I know. But maybe they wanted to buy Iberia Parish all.
I mean, you look at fiscal 21, we actually collected 657,000,
I know, and then
that
it
was
just
probably
dropped.
a bright star, in the,
We needed it.
in a few years, before that. And, the first 2 quarters come in and they so low, so.
We came in at 1.2 million when we first came in 16.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So we were still collecting over $1 million, and we were like, man, this is horrible
Right.
compared to what it was. And now we're just praying to get back to that $1 million
Now you're praying
mark.
to get to 300,000.
What you probably saw was they went rework some wells because it had climbed up. You saw that money. Those wells are reworked. They're not gonna be reworked for another 10, 12 years. Late. All right.
So we do, we have this fund, we actually have, the 2 levels of interest income. We have the interest income that's earned on the fund, the monies in this fund. And then we also do transfer the money from the Texaco royalty fund, into this fund. So we did receive the $1,000,001 that came from Gomesa. I have not budgeted anything. We do get the money, I wanna say either end of March, into April. It's not anything that's exactly set in stone that we're gonna get the $1 million. I think that Congress has the ability to change those. So we wait until, we know what that number's gonna be. Very last line item is the transfer to the jail fund. So we talked about that at length earlier. On page 2, under Homeland Security, you'll see that statewide generator program. Part of this is a generator, the active piece that's actually like working, and I mean not working, but like the active piece that's going on. There's a generator that was procured in last year for T-Bayou sewer plant. And how much of the rest of this happens, I'm not 100% certain. So in the event that these numbers land up not being accurate, we'll end up carrying forward whatever needs to be carried forward to fiscal 23. The next category is for the home elevation grant. So we do have, I think it's about 10 houses that have been lifted and or are in the process of being lifted. We actually had a meeting on this project, I want to say last Wednesday or Thursday. And so in that meeting, the engineer notified us that there's actually 2 houses that more than likely are going to be lifted into next year. So we'll likely have a carryover of some of this funding into next year's budget as well.
Let me ask you while we're on this. I know there are some houses that have dropped out of the program
Correct.
during this time. So does that pool of money go next year towards other structures that could possibly be lifted in 23 that were applications of 21?
I'm not certain.
Not necessarily.
How,
What we've done so far, Warren, we request some of the houses, like I think it's 4 homes that backed out. So the price went up, the price was more expensive than some of the homeowners thought. In fact, you and I were talking
to one of them, correct.
And so we tried to see if we could get some of that money from the 4 homes that wasn't lifted,
To help out
to
that,
have those people that's actually lifting. So we still haven't got a short answer yet, but they're looking at it. And it looked like it's gonna work. But I don't think you're gonna be able to carry it over to next year, to another project. Or else the people already submitted applications.
got it.
Mr. Gurr?
So
Good.
the next line item, that 1,000,007, that is actually the balance of, Gomesa. So what we've collected, less what we've expended and or appropriated, that balance is 1,000,007. In my mind, I've set aside some of this already, and won't allow like the engineers to actually contract with, People's Cooley. And not knowing, People's Cooley was bid out and, the contract value is like, well, I think 2.3 million, that's the next low category. But not knowing if there were gonna be any change orders on that job and that sort of thing, I didn't wanna commit to too much additional engineering, knowing, the uncertainty.
So, I know this is a sore subject, but Larry, it's just us, can you just give us something on that?
Yes. The last thing I spoke to, I don't wanna say the guy's name, well, Rivers.
Yeah.
Riverson?
And, he told me.
So you spoke to him
Oh, yeah.
recently?
I met with him.
Oh.
Since you said he didn't wanna meet with me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what he told me, really.
Okay. But anyway, I've met with him and, we've talked since then as well. And he said his attorney is gonna get back with him and he'll get back with us. They're still working some things out. But
The
everything that they
attorneys.
wanted from us, we're already getting it.
Okay.
And basically what that was, Jerome, was, listen to Jerome, Brian, I gotta stop, cause this
Yeah.
is legal stuff here, so I'll stop there.
Mr. Gurr?
Okay.
He didn't want to.
So the $2.5 million is appropriated for People's Cooley. You'll see that in fiscal '23. Rodair, we have
I didn't bring
pretty much finished off with the Gomesa portion of that. We'll see that a little bit later on, with the CPRA side. The $55,000 that's budgeted for, that's a joint project between parish, and I know St. Mary Levy District, but I don't know any of the other parties.
Yes.
But I think
Still
our
waiting to get a draw.
responsibility, y'all recently passed that resolution for about $50,000. Little Valley, to finish off the, engineering, 102,000. George Lawson to finish that engineering, approximately 33,000. And then Rhett and Rio, approximately 36,000. And so like the second phase of those three wouldn't come from parish appropriations, but would come through awards through CPRA.
CPRA.
Flipping the page, you have at the very, very top, you have Stumpy Bayou, so approximately 264 in engineering. And
District
again,
10 got a
that
levy
goes-
over there.
That goes to CPRA. So next you have the Rodair, water structure. So that appropriation is through CPRA, and they're gonna cover all of the expenses. Parish government does not have a responsibility, we'll pay, we get reimbursed.
Is it still kind of premature for me to ask you where we at as far as the awarding of the bid with them? Is this for Rodair?
Rodair actually hasn't been put out for bid yet.
We gotta be close. I mean, the engineering's been done on it, right?
They
The
should be-
design phase is already finished, correct?
Yes.
Yes, but we have, it's close, Warren, but I don't
Okay.
know.
So likely we'll have to probably come back and, do some adjustments on this, but I'll know, before we get to final adoption, and if I feel like we need to carry the full 2.3 over, we'll make that
Yeah,
adjustment there.
because this is one of your biggest structures so far that we've
Yeah.
implemented.
We still waiting we learned some things from some of the others, so we're still waiting for some signatures before we,
Because if you notice, the smaller ones are going quick compared to the big ones.
So next category, you have Jefferson Canal. So the Jefferson Canal is actually a north project and a south project. One of those has already been put out for bid. We actually had a meeting, the pre-construction meeting, so that should be getting started soon.
So both of them are captured in that one?
Yes, the full 2.5, almost 2.6, yes. So the last line item on page 4 is the transfer to the bond redemption fund. And so you'll notice it goes from 434 to 222, and that's because we'll pay off the road debt in fiscal '23.
And we can go out for more road bonds,
Who you
fix more
thought?
streets, right?
Who you thought? Jump to page 5 and you'll see that appropriation
there the
associated with the
reality
bridge
is.
debt jumps from 36,000
I know where they
to
got 2.5
216. So, kind of
It's
the
a
way that
wash.
it was set up, whenever we delayed the principal payments, that was taken into consideration, that the payoff, and, it kind of levelized. So,
Just
maybe not too soon, sorry.
We get so close to
wish
that
we-
light out the end of the tunnel,
It's
and
a
then the
glimmer.
tunnel somehow
That's a
slides.
train coming our way.
So in the last project that we carrying forward is the very bottom of page 5. There's a CWEF award that we have about $27,000 left over on. We have not gotten notice, or we maybe are in the process of getting notice that we got, I want to say maybe an additional like 75. So $27,000 to extend water lines. I mean, that might get you a pipe, 6 inches long. So the thought is to combine the 27 with the 75 and, actually like make that a project. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Put 6 inches. 6 inch pipe might mean a lot.
Mr. Gus, now, you
Yeah,
have
I just, before we adjourn tonight, some of the funds don't look as good. Some funds still look quite healthy. Kim, Larry, where we were in 2016 to where we are today.
Good job.
We were dealt, not against anybody particularly, we were dealt some bad hands, or the cards weren't as good as we thought they were. But the way we played them, it could have been a lot worse, and kudos to you guys. I know there's a lot of times I was on the other end of that stick, beating that stick on y'all about, hey, we've got to find ways to cut more. And so at some point in time, I got to say, we've come a long ways, and it's because of teamwork, and to continue to have these conversations with y'all. I think 2025, hopefully most of us will still be here. We'll be able to start to see some rewards come from this point. Not to say that roads will get done, but to start to see maybe some paint on the courthouse again, or some nice luxury things.
I was about to say, Warren, just because you're being nice, you ain't getting your road paved.
I know. I was close though.
You sound good, though. You
What
sound.
about taking Lewis Street from?
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim.
One of the things, and you're on point, and some of the things we need to look at is trying to staff up again, staff up.
Yeah.
Staff up.
We'll retain first, and then.
one last thing. Packet for next week should be in front of you. I was
So
guilty
bring
of
it.
calling, and I had it. Yeah. Anybody else before we adjourn?
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
All right, guys.
Second.